Welcome once again to another edition of NMH at 1, where we bring you the latest news for the day and for the last 24 hours. My name is Jochen Kutsia and I'm your host today. Surely there is no doubt that the budget for 2021, which was presented yesterday in Parliament by Minister of Finance Ipumbu Shimi, is on everyone's lips today. Namibia is approaching unprecedented government debt levels on account of a historic deficit with an amount of 8.4 billion having been earmarked for interest payments. Just interest payments. Let that sink in. Government loans will inevitably be raised to 117.5 billion, as we need to add this year's budget deficit to existing loans on account of government earnings having dropped to 51.4 billion, while it needs to spend 72.8 billion. Critics regard the budget as unimaginative on account of there being no clear indication of what initiatives and stimuli are included to help get the country out of this economic crisis, which was caused by COVID-19. Ms. Eloise du Plessis of PSG Namibia commented by saying that there is no difficult decisions being made this time round. We simply borrow more money. It would also seem a little odd for the minister to regard all types of bigger expenditures as important enough to warrant a comment, but he chose not to mention the very contentious point of subsidizing Air Namibia yet again, and this time to the tune of a whopping 985 million, almost 1 billion. In the meanwhile, the Ministry of Environment, Tourism and Forestry have confirmed that a well-known pastor has been arrested on account of apparently being in possession of 2 rhino horns. And finally, we bring you an update on the current COVID-19 my apologies. We bring you an update on the current COVID-19 my apologies. We bring you an update on the current COVID-19 confirmed cases, which have risen to 22 since yesterday. Let's go to the slides. So as you can see, the budget being very, very COVID focused. But yeah, so now we are looking at the testing data. The confirmed cases as of yesterday are 22, with the latest case being announced yesterday. A 63-year-old man from Walfish Bay, who is now in critical condition. We understand that there's a lot of other conditions that are not proving to be very, very beneficial during his current COVID-19 diagnoses. So yes, negative cases stand at 3,012. Discarded cases, those were the ones that were soiled or not validated, were 66, and the pending tests are 10. In quarantine at the moment, we have 75 new people in quarantine. 97 have been discharged, and the total discharged people from quarantine is at 1,178 right now. Currently, we also have 8 in isolation and 14 cases which have recovered, resulting in a case load of roughly 60%. Okay, so now let's look at some of the videos that we have from the regions. First off, Leandria Lowe of the Irongo spoke to Governor Knowledge Ipinge about him supposedly overstepping his authority, according to the Minister of Information and Technology, Honorable Peya Mushilenga. Let's check this out.
Okay, I'm here this morning with Walvish Bay Urban Constituency Councillor Knowledge Ipinge. Now, yesterday, Minister of Information Peya Mushilenga said that you overstepped your powers when you asked that Standard Bank and FB du Toit close for about 14 days in relation to the truck driver that tested positive here in Walvish Bay. Just your response to that, Councillor.
That's the emphasis of Peya Mushilenga. And I'm not responsible for what he's saying or not saying. I've acted guided by the Disaster Risk Management Act and guided actually in my authority as the authorized officer. So what is important at this stage is the proactiveness of Standard Bank as well as FB du Toit. That is what matters. They have complied. They have shared necessary information, starting with a list of their employees as well as their clients that might have been at potential risk. And that is very important at this stage because it has guided the process of contact tracing. At the same time as well, they have fumigated their places with disinfectants. And this is very important to state that on the 16th of March, this very same office have initially made recommendations to ensure that all public spaces are actually disinfected accordingly, and this should be a regular process. Well, implementation thereof, as we know with government bureaucracy, remains a challenge at this stage. Had we had that in place, it wouldn't have cost penny, it wouldn't have cost all these implementations. It would have been executed at ease.
Yes.
But then in the absence of such, definitely somewhere, somehow, we need to call for action.
Yes.
Commendable enough, video footage was reviewed. Certain things have come from the video footage that was reviewed. One could actually make thorough assessments and establish how to go about what can be in place, what was not in place, and then improve from there. And that is very, very important. The question we should be asking ourselves now is it because of knowledge? Is it not because of knowledge? And that doesn't matter at this stage. It is about the public.
Yes.
Is the public safe? Yes, the public is safe. Then it is a win for government. Government has done its part through its responsibility towards the public, towards the community, towards our societies. And that is what matters here. So to me, it is not about me, who, or whatever. But then if people choose to do that, they are more than welcome to do that. But then I have a responsibility towards those who have ensured that I'm sitting in this office today. Those that have been seeking advice, those who have been sending recommendations through my office, because we should not forget that I'm the link of the grassroots people to government. And there is procedures how it goes. It starts with the grassroots people.
Yes.
It comes down to the constituency level. It comes down to the regional level, and it comes to the national level. And we need to respect that. So if someone feel by sitting in Vedo, the knowledge didn't do that, they're definitely somewhere, somehow, they are not communicating. And at the same time, as far as I can remember, this very same office have a communication strategy which was recommended, and that is what we keep on following. Our communication strategy has been implemented already in March, and we've been consistently following this. We have a response plan in place. We've consistently been using this. As we speak, we have stakeholders within our constituency. We need to be the helping hand to those stakeholders, whether it is the Ministry of Health, whether it is the Ministry of ICT, whether it is what ministry. If they feel there's information they need, the office is open to them. Let them make use of the information. We keep making recommendations, we keep on sharing information. And that is how it's supposed to be. Had the Honorable Paya Mushelenga made contact with this office, he wouldn't even have said that a cabinet meeting was called. Imagine saying a cabinet meeting was called, they discuss, and there's a recommendation or they have established from the Ministry of Health that case 21 was at Okahaja, OK Foods. We have established that was a mistake being communicated by case 21. We have rectified it and informed accordingly that it is initially Pick and Pay.
Yes.
Pick and Pay have gone to the health department in Okahaja has gone as far as reviewing that footage and doing all this information. So if there's real consultation, if there's real information being shared, he wouldn't have made that mistake. Meaning he copied and pasted from the document that was out there. Yet, say a cabinet meeting was called. What are you doing in the cabinet meeting? Discussing knowledge. It is a joke. To have a whole cabinet meeting sitting and discussing an individual, whereby we're supposed to be focused on case 22 that we're having now. Potential risk that is coming up. That's where our focus should be on. Not on individuals. This is way bigger than all of us.
Yes.
And it's about time that we put political differences aside,
yes.
and work as a nation. And I should say that I applaud the governor for his inclusive approach and being the pillar within the region, trying to consult all relevant authorities, whether it is at local, whether it is at constituency, whether it is at regional council level. He has been putting this together, and he keeps on seeking information, he keeps on investigating, he keeps on sharing the necessary information. So let's make use of these structures.
Awesome. Please stay tuned to our channels as we will be bringing you an update on that story and so much more. Next up, if over the last few weeks you've probably noticed that education-based booklets have been included in your newspapers, and this is an initiative by the Ministry of Education and NMH to really make distance learning accessible to all children all around the country. So Elizabeth Joseph, on a recent trip to Ludritz, spoke to Mr. Cassius Chanyenge of the NMH Circuit Education Directorate on how they've received the books and how it has impacted their operations. Let's check this out.
So just take us through the process of receiving the booklets that have been developed in Windhoek as well as distributing it here. Hi sir, how are you?
I'm fine. I'm Cassius Chanyenge, the Inspector of Education for NMH Circuit as well as some schools in the Garib Circuit.
Alright. Yeah, you can just take us through maybe the how you guys get the booklets and the process and how that has been like for you.
Yeah, we received the books with that actually were delivered by Hardap Freight. And what we've done is that the first batch, we actually stapled them together, cut off the top part so that the booklet is actually fully fledged. And we were fortunate to have some of the head of departments and principals that actually assisted with the first batch. And we actually disseminated to all the schools in the circuit. What we have also done is that the remainder of the schools that did not get the booklets, we actually duplicated it here and also disseminated it to the schools.
Alright, that is a very noble thing for you to do. So just maybe, can you just highlight some points of how do you think this will impact the child's life once they've received this booklet?
Yeah, it's actually a building block, and if one could actually look at what has happened is that there was a lot of thought into this process. When we look at Media Print and the Ministry of Education actually making sure that we keep our learners busy, we keep them abreast of what is going on. And we had one of the learners actually while we were packing, and she was in grade 2 when we got the first batch, and she actually started to complete the book and she enjoyed the book, and that actually indicated to us that there is actually some thought into this process.
Alright, if you could perhaps just maybe give some of your colleagues a bit of, let's say, advice of how to move forward during this tough time in terms of e-learning and how to just remain optimistic and...
Yes, quite interesting there, and it's really interesting to see that even in this digital world, how print media still has the power to enrich lives. Okay, up next we head up north where Kenya Kambowe, our journalist in the region, spoke to suspended APP Rundu councillor Mr. Matthew Wakudomu, who shed some light on his recent suspension, and also pointed out at the difficulty in campaigning for the November elections. Watch this.
Okay, Honorable Wakudum is a suspended councillor from the Runtown Council. Can you just tell us, after you've been out of office for some time, what have you been up to, and what is your view on the whole situation? How do you want it to be solved?
It is a laughing story. It is a drama on its own. Saying that I have been waited to see my suspension letter. Up to date, it never arrived. Be that or received. Be that I'm still really see to it that no, we are elected as a politician. Now, since now the minister failed to suspend us for the reason only him knows, we want a clarity on this matter as soon as possible, because for quite long we have been waited to hear what is next. Up now, since we came to suspension, everything just comes to a standstill. Now we want really a development to take place in the town, as the voters have been entrusted in us to give us that mandate and the power for this for the next 5 years, which is not yet over. Now, I can't really say much, but I will love to see the minister. What is next? That is most what we want to see or to hear.
Maybe just my last question. As political, let me say you are politically appointed to serve for the IPP in the Runtown Council. Now, elections are scheduled for for November 2020. How difficult does it make it for you to campaign for the upcoming elections, knowing that now you don't know, you are hanging in the balance, you're on suspension, you don't know for how long and for what reasons that you are claiming now? How difficult does it make it for you to campaign?
To be honest, it is really, they put us in a place where we can't make ourselves productive by saying that people entrusted in us, they wanted to see progress made so far. But now to go back to the people and tell them, or to do the campaign for to come vote us as IPP, it is very hard. But okay, for others who has followed all the ongoing fight between us as the politician and the minister, probably they might really have a solution to it. But believe me, it is very, very rare or to make it out that no, maybe our people will understand us so far. But the most important, which I want people to know, that no, although we are in this dilemma, trust me, we are still the same, with the same mandate, with the same principles. So that when people, what people have seen so far, what people has heard so far about APP, we stand for the truth and for equal distribution, wealth distribution. Be it the plot, be it what people saying no, they don't have heaven. For people to join this council, the vendors and many others who really look for services, we were there and we had many meetings in the past, whereby we have invited and also condoned to it and have some recommendation and the resolution take, which is just idling in the office.
Okay. No, thank you very much for your time, Honorable Wakudumo.
Thank you. You are most welcome. You are most welcome. You are most welcome. We want development to continue. We want really, we can make Rundo great again.
You know, I always find it impressive how we're able to get news from across Namibia, and that's the whole idea behind Network Media Hub at One. It's not only focusing on Namibia Media Holdings brands, but all news sources across Namibia and the region to make sure that we provide our viewers with a comprehensive news source. And also seeing that you're watching from across the region. So just like to say thank you to Sofa Ngave, Oletu Hangula, Jonas Kashipi, Ocean Kawugo, Genesis Ngovure. Thank you so much everyone for watching, and please stay tuned, keep watching, tune in every day, and we'll give you more exciting content. Now we chat to Mr. Ohone Klache, who caught up with opposition leader, Landless People's Movement party leader, Mr. Bernardo Swartboy, yesterday after the tabling of the budget. The opposition parties were quite vocal while the budget was being tabled, and then afterwards Ohone caught up with Mr. Swartboy and got his takeaways from that afternoon.
Initial assessment of this budget is that this government has never really thoroughly sat down to apply its mind to the issues that affect Namibians. If we have to give you an indication of some of the votes and how they have transpired, look at the amount that is given to defense, about 6 billion. I just spoke to Honorable Shimi now, his salary is about 4.5 billion. I would have then said reduce that, look into that and reduce it so that you bring it below at least a 5 billion threshold, and then you have 1 billion that you can give to agriculture and land. Regarding agriculture and land reform, you have seen that they have been given 1.3 billion. 1.3 billion, you'll have to split it between operations, salaries, and then between land and agriculture. That is about probably even a 400 each for this. Agriculture is now supposed to create jobs for this country. It is supposed to create the capacity to produce food. But Shimi and Erika Shafuta have failed, together with the entire team, to look at the sectors that matter. Let's go quickly to trade and industrialization. And that is why Shekera Toa was frustrated. They have kept it more or less at an average of 170 million every year. How do you want to push a country from a middle income country to a higher level income country by keeping industrialization at 174 million? Precisely what can somebody do with 170 million after you have paid salaries? There's nothing more you can do. You go and look at finance itself. Getting unnecessary monies, trying to put up a revenue administration, which will add to the already inefficient and problematic state-owned enterprise regime. Why are they still pursuing a revenue authority? Indications are that those revenue authorities, where they have been put up, have not significantly enhanced state capacity for collection of revenue in any case. So you have these fundamental problems where these fellows talk about reform, but the substantive demonstration of their reform, if you look at the figures, it is not there to be seen. So this is not a budget that is friendly for young people, about 900.
We now bring you our Windhoek Express moment. Yanni du Plessis from the Windhoek Express captured this moment when the staff and children of the Holy Rock Orphanage were excited on account of the Lions Club Windhoek handing over donations of clothes, diapers and food valued at $10,000.
With 2 new babies left in the hands of the Holy Rock Orphanage this week, caretakers are now looking after 21 babies and 9 older children. These children end up at the orphanage mainly because their parents can't look after them anymore. One of the 4 caretakers, Elmarie Petersen, said they do this to help the children, and it was all smiles on Wednesday when the Lions Club paid a visit to them and handed over some much-needed items, including diapers, food, blankets and cleaning products. The value of the donation was 10,000 Namibian dollars.
Now a glance at the front pages. The Allgemeine Zeitung led with the budget referring to the massive deficit, while Republican speaks of a skilled thriller, i.e. a debt shock, and the Namibian Sun also pointed out a substantial debt burden to the tune of 117 billion Namibian dollars. The Namibian also leads with the budget debt and deficit, while the New Era concentrates on the budget required to restart the economy, and the Confidante leads with an article about the new fishing rights being kept on hold. I know that one is quite a sore point for a lot of people. Now moving on the inside pages, the RZ gives us a complete graphic of the individual expenditure costs compared to the previous budget, while on page 3 of the Republican, they tell us about the Swapper Party having been docked up to 2,000 Namibian dollars on account of the president and other officials having a party while under lockdown restrictions. Now, Namibian Sun tells us on its page 3 of a man who returned from Angola to Nkurunkuru in the Kavango West region. He was reported by his family after he was taken to he was taken to a quarantine camp. Now, this week in our interview segment, Frank Stefan interviewed the Deputy Executive Director of the Ministry of Justice, Ms. Gladys Pickering, who gave us an overview of how much work went into finalizing the ongoing laws required during the COVID-19 lockdown.
Hi, welcome back. As you can see, I'm not alone in the studio. With me is Ms. Gladys Pickering. She's the Deputy Executive Director of the Ministry of Justice. Welcome in the studio.
Thank you.
We've invited her because she offered to give us some more information about what has been going on in this time of COVID-19, where we saw many legislation in part and totally new legislation being passed on a regular basis, very efficiently and very fast, more so than we were used to, I dare say. So, yeah, welcome. Please tell us a bit more about the process, what you've been into.
Thank you. Thank you for this opportunity, and it's an honor for us to share with the public at large what we have been doing as the Ministry of Justice to make sure that effect is given to the proclamations, the notices and the regulations that were supposed to be published in the Government Gazette. So as the Ministry of Justice, we have 9 directorates that falls under us, and amongst those 9 we have one directorate called the Directorate Legislative Drafting. This directorate is primarily responsible for ensuring that bills are drafted in the manner and format that is required for those bills to eventually be tabled in Parliament. Now, unless the drafters do their work properly, Parliament will certainly not have bills for discussion, and legislative reforms will not take place as it should. And the bills will not, if they do not do a proper job, the bills will not be in the format and of the standard and quality that it is supposed to be. So our legislative drafters, the team is led by Ms. Felicity Overseas, and she has approximately 14 drafters working with her, of whom only 3 drafters are experienced at the level where they can draft unassisted or unsupervised. So they are currently only 4 drafters who are supervising the others. During this state of emergency, they were put under enormous pressure.
I would think so, yeah.
As you can imagine, to date, the ministry has issued a number of 18 gazettes during this period, as from the 28th of March until the 5th of May, or at least until the 15th of May. We have issued 18 gazettes, and these gazettes pertain to the regulations made by the President under Article 26 of the Constitution. It also relates to finance regulations, directives by regional councils, by the Ministry of Education, Arts and Culture, the Ministries of Environment, Forestry and Tourism, and so many others, trade and industry. They were many, on transport and movement and everything that you have heard over the past 2 months that relates to how do we give effect to the regulations that were issued first on the 28th of March and then again on the 17th of April. So coming up with all these sets of regulations, and to make sure that when we are talking about the limitation of rights, that those limitations are indeed within the limits and that we can justify those, and to make sure that all constitutional requirements are met and that every single detail of what needs to be contained in these notices are in fact there. These people had to sit for days on end. Many a days they only left the offices at 3, 4, 5 in the morning.
But this is what gets me a bit. Maybe you can explain it a bit more. Was it easier to draft this sort of legislation, or where does the difference come in? Because if you look at 18 different types of laws having been written in such a short time, and then we invariably see that maybe 18 have been passed for the previous years each year. Where does the difference come in? Is it because it's a much shorter draft, or where does the time become so much less? I mean, to compare 18 laws for 12 months and then to put 18 laws into basically a month, then you suddenly ask, where does it normally go wrong? Why does it always have to take so long? I mean, being a journalist, obviously one of my pet childs is the Access to Information Act that has been always floating around, and always we hear, but it has been passed back and it had to be rewritten and it had to be done. So I'm just trying to get that scope or that feeling for the scope of work concerned here.
That is a very valid question. So what would happen under normal circumstances, and as we speak, we have a number of 34 draft bills that are currently pending with the drafters that fall outside the scope of the COVID-19 legislation. So those draft bills, they have been working on in the normal course of events. Now with those ones, what would normally happen is that the drafters would receive, or the Ministry of Justice at least would receive, a policy document from the instructing or requesting ministry, being the client ministry.
Okay, yeah.
So we do not establish or come up with the policy for a specific legislation necessarily. We get the instruction with the policy document from the instructing or requesting ministry, office or agency, which means that in the normal course of events, a draft legislation can go to and from the Ministry of Justice and the client OMA several times to sort out policy issues and maybe some other issues that might have come up in the meantime. But the main thing is that the policy directive comes from the instructing ministry or the client ministry. So maybe because we feel that under those circumstances we have time to deliberate more, sometimes we need more stakeholder consultations, sometimes events are overtaken by developments not just domestically but also internationally, so things happen over a period of time. For the purposes of the COVID-19 legislation, there was almost no time to go to and from. There was virtually no time. We were left with no option to have stakeholder consultations, etc. So what we had to do was to act swiftly. The moment the President declared the state of emergency and Article 26 of the Constitution became applicable, we had to act swiftly because, remember, under a state of emergency, people's rights are also affected.
Good, yeah.
So if you want to infringe on the rights that people normally enjoy, especially constitutional rights, then you have to make sure that there is a legal mandate for us to do that. So that is why we had to, these legislative drafters together with the team of advisors from the Directorate Legal Advice, which also falls under the Ministry of Justice and who works with the Attorney General, they had to literally sit day and night. There was no eat, no sleep, no nothing. Just working on the regulations to have the regulations out in time. You cannot start imposing the measurements
if you haven't decided
do not
what
have,
punishment is or
if
whatever.
you do not have the legal mandate to do so. And then obviously the regulations in return made provision for certain directives to be issued by various ministries and institutions, which further cascaded the provisions of the regulations into practical directives, which to have the effect of and force of law also had to be drafted in that manner and to be gazetted. So there was no other choice. This is exactly what it is, a state of emergency. And then
But how does it exactly work? So basically, I mean, obviously it's not the president acting alone, but technically in this case, the president is your client. So he tells you, this is what I want. And then each minister gets his turn to say, but just remember, this will interfere with me on this scale, on that scale, and so on. So there is still a bit of consultation, wouldn't there be?
Definitely. There was, in fact, if you look at it that way, there was quite extensive consultations between the Attorney General and obviously being the principal legal advisor to government, and the President, the Attorney General and other ministers, the Minister of Justice with the President and other ministers, and then the Attorney General and the Minister of Justice themselves in person also joined the teams with the work on the ground. So they actually also sat physically until those early hours of the morning, because you would find that we would say now for this regulation on, or the directives on education, that although this is what the Ministry of Education sent forth, it doesn't meet this requirement, so we had to consult again and try to restructure or rephrase and come up with something. And as I said, there was no time. You can't wait for a day or two to get back with an instruction.
No, because I remember when it came out on the 27th, I mean, your deadline was technically for the 28th.
Yes.
It didn't leave you much space. Obviously, you'd done some work by that time, but...
We literally gazetted like a couple of minutes before 12.
Yeah. So where do you see this thing going forward? Have you finished most of that work now, or are there still loose ends which you have to tie up?
Most of it has been done now. So we are now waiting for the next stage to commence, and obviously different regulations need to be issued for different stages of the state of emergency. So we will now hopefully move to stage 3, and during stage 3 different modalities will become applicable, and for those modalities we have to issue a new set of regulations. So if new directives have to be issued again also in line with those regulations, then the process starts all over again.
And does that technically mean that these previous regulations fall by the wayside? So in other words, you literally write a new one replacing the previous one?
Yes, so some provisions of the previous regulations will still be applicable for whatever situation remains the same.
Yeah.
But when the situation is changed, then a new regulation will be passed on that changed situation.
Yeah, what I'm trying to get at, remember, for example, most countries have this old problem that you have one law and then you have an adjustment, another adjustment, and each time there's a new bylaw that reflects on the original law.
Yeah.
In this case, is it not much easier to simply say, okay, that one is repealed, and now we've got a new regulation that sort of takes the place of the previous one?
Exactly, that is exactly what will happen. So the first set of regulations was contained in Proclamation number 9. The amended state of emergency regulations was contained in Proclamation number 13. So the other one will also be an amended state of emergency regulations contained in the new proclamation, in the new
yeah, so technically
yes.
The previous, let's say 18,
yes.
not 18 laws, but maybe 10 or 12
yes.
will fall away
yes.
because they're now null and void, and now it's the new one.
Exactly, they're not applicable anymore, not needed anymore, so they fall away.
So you've got your work cut out for the next few months.
We do, and it has placed enormous pressure, as I said, on our human resource capacity. Luckily, we have very good teams. They have really been very committed and dedicated to this task. And I think now that everybody has seen what they can do under abnormal circumstances, the expectation of deliverables for under normal circumstances will be much higher, because we have actually now proved that we can do a lot
much more in a less time.
Yes, but of course you also have to remember that these are human beings that we are working with, and we need to take into account that mostly they work overtime without any remuneration. So we have to take that into account, and hopefully we will be able to work faster under normal times and on normal bills. So they have been meeting their set standards normally, but as I said, it depends on the client ministry whether they are up to date with their instructions and or if their policies are even clear.
Yeah, just one last question. Does this mean now that your existing work has fallen a bit behind, or have you still been able to sort of keep that up to date with the new legislation period starting really to, well, what is it now?
Today.
Yeah.
Yes. Okay, so that was a challenge for us, but we have managed to do that. So you will see that from the Ministry of Justice, there will be quite a number of bills tabled in Parliament within this session. Some of them are still under consideration or under consultation between the drafters and us being the policy holders of those bills. But there are also other bills from other ministries that are still with the drafters that also need to go to Parliament now. So the drafters will be, they've been carrying those ones along as well. And we are still adamant that we will be able to submit, to table these bills in Parliament. So we are excited about it.
Yeah, actually what happens now is you've just proven that you're faster than you thought you would be. And so as from here on, your masters will always insist that it's easy to do it.
As I said, I think the expectations will be much higher. Yeah. But it is also a reality that we do not want to, we are managing the situation carefully because we have very few drafters. Yeah. And we do not want to burn them out and then everybody will suffer as a result.
Yeah, no, sure.
So we are managing that situation carefully, but certainly the COVID-19, the state of emergency has shown us that we can do a lot more than we thought we were capable of doing. So.
Well,
but I have to say that we are very impressed with the speed, the quality, and the output. It is true that maybe we have not been perfect in all our drafts, or all our endeavors did not result in perfect work, but I think we have done pretty well.
Yeah, I congratulate you.
Thank you.
And on that note, we obviously thank you for coming in and wish you for some happy working in the future and maybe under a bit less stress.
Thank you, Frank.
Okay.
Thank you.
Have a nice day.
Thank you very much.
Wow, it's incredible to see the Herculean efforts that the Ministry of Justice has put in to make sure that the legal framework for the current context right now is up to date and, you know, serves the people in the manner it should. So that brings us to the end of this week's live broadcast. Thank you so much for joining us on today's episode of Network Media Hub at 1. And yes, right now, President Geingob will be updating the nation on the current COVID-19 situation, the lockdown, and the way forward. So yeah, hopefully we'll be able to have a sundowner sometime next week. Thank you very much. My name is Johan Kutsia.